So Lee has given orders to Richard Ewell on the 22nd of June that if he has the opportunity to capture Harrisburg, to go ahead and do so. And that's going to be the objective of the Second Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia. You folks live in York, you're familiar with the fact that the Susquehanna River is quite wide, just outside of Harrisburg. It's not deep, but it's very wide. There were only two bridges around Harrisburg, plus the Great Covered Bridge at Columbia. So if the Confederates were going to cross, they were going to have to pontoon, or they were going to have to find fords and wade their way across. And coming from the south and west, as the main body of Ewell's Corps was, they were going to have to make their way through Camp Hill if they were going to be able to invest Harrisburg. In the meantime, Early decided he was going to see if he could get across the Susquehanna River via the Great Covered Bridge at Columbia, enter Lancaster County, and come on Harrisburg from the south. So this is a legitimate threat, and it is creating waves of panic through the North.
Gettysburg 160, Gettysburg Campaign 160, and we are trying, it's taking us years, but we are trying to knock off all the many Gettysburg Campaign sites, and we're getting there. You're really happy to be here at Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, an important and incredible moment in the Gettysburg Campaign. Now, this is June of 1863. Confederate and Union armies are both moving up in this direction. The Confederates have a head start. We've already talked about a lot of this, and the advanced element is under a new corps under Richard Stoddard Ewell. I think you might already know that 2 of Ewell's 3 divisions are headed over toward Harrisburg, so that you could actually cross this impressive river at Harrisburg. So many places you can do that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But one of his divisions, an experienced one under Jubal Anderson Early, is coming more eastward. They go through Gettysburg on June 26th, and then they are camped outside there, and then within the next day, they march toward York, Pennsylvania. Okay, it's incredible when I drive to York thinking about doing that march, you know, as an army with everything you need in just a portion of a day.
Dave, anything you want to say about the Wrightsville Bridge, or we're going to bring on one of the other members of Bobblehead George to do that for us?
Well, I'm going to bring on Eric Gimby here in a second. The river itself, the Susquehanna River, is 444 miles long. It's almost a mile wide, and this bridge, and this river goes all the way down into the Delmarva, into the Chesapeake Bay. It is the largest non-navigable river in the United States of America, even today. So I'm going to bring on my good friend and my colleague, Eric Gimby, and he's going to talk to us about the bridge.
So we are standing on the Wrightsville side of the Susquehanna. On the opposite side, we have Columbia. There were multiple bridges that connected Wrightsville and Columbia, but the most famous of these was the second bridge, which stood from 1834 until 1863. The bridge took 2 years to complete and was financed by the Columbia Bank and Bridge Company for $157,300. At the time of its completion, it was the largest covered bridge in the world, stretching over a mile long at 5,620 feet.
Thanks, Eric. So what would this bridge actually look like? So it's completely covered. Are we talking railroad bridge, foot traffic, mix of both?
It's a mix of both, I believe. Yeah.
So what Lee is going to do is push off towards the banks of the Susquehanna. He's not going to say, hey, take Harrisburg, but Jubal Anderson Early, his bad old man, wants that prize. And he is going to charge, as Gary pointed out, John Brown Gordon to move forward with his brigade, 6 regiments of Georgians. Now, the idea is that we're going to have this bridge behind us. What do we do with it? If we can't hold back the Confederates, which Jubal Early's not taking these Confederates very seriously, he thinks he can brush them aside. We think we're going to destroy part of the bridge. That's key. We're not going to try to destroy more than 5,000 feet of this bridge because it's important. This was the main line to get you across the Susquehanna. This is the main road that led you across the state from Philadelphia over to Pittsburgh. You don't want to destroy this infrastructure if you can help it. But Colonel Frick is going to try to destroy a section or 2 of this bridge, drop it in the river so later on the federal forces can come back and rebuild it if the Confederates take it. The order is given to try to destroy a few spans of that bridge. The men will start to move back across the bridge itself, some of them in good order, like the 87th Pennsylvania, Company E or F of the 27th Pennsylvania, or Emergency Militia. They were said to be marching off in good order. They're not running away like some of these men had done earlier in the campaign, and they start to try to drop this bridge into the water. They will drill holes under the superstructure. They'll put gunpowder inside of it, try to blow it up. They'll blow part of the roof off, blows part of the siding off, but it doesn't destroy the superstructure because it's so well built. So now what do? We go to the other side of the Susquehanna, about a mile and a quarter across the Susquehanna from us. They get coal oil, and they start to put that onto the bridge, and they start to light the bridge. And as they pull back across the bridge, the entire bridge starts to burn.
So this is the Cumberland Valley Railroad Bridge, the great covered bridge across the Susquehanna, connecting Wrightsville on the right side of the image to Columbia on the left side of the
Eric,
image.
this is Camelback. This is Harrisburg.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Camelback. You're right. I'm sorry. So this is outside of Harrisburg, and there, in fact, and I should have noticed that, is the other railroad bridge to the south of it. So this is the main route that the Confederates would hope to take in order to enter and capture Harrisburg. So Ewell's plan, again, was to divide his force. Rhodes and Johnson to march through the Cumberland Valley via Carlisle to threaten Harrisburg, with Jenkins' cavalry out in front and Early's division to go through Gettysburg to York, with a portion of Jenkins' cavalry with him escorting him. On the 29th, word has gotten to Robert E. Lee via a spy by the name of Henry Harrison that the Army of the Potomac has crossed the Potomac River, is in Maryland, and in hot pursuit of Lee's army. So Lee is going to that day order the concentration of the Army of Northern Virginia at Cashtown, which is about 6 miles to the west of Gettysburg, meaning that Gordon and Early will receive orders to withdraw from the Susquehanna River and move their troops in the direction of Gettysburg. Same thing will happen with the main body of Ewell's corps, which is why Jenkins will have to break off and withdraw from his skirmishing in Camp Hill as the Confederate troops begin to backtrack and make their way in the direction back to Carlisle, and then from Carlisle to Heidlersburg, and they'll take up a position a few miles north of Gettysburg on June 30th. In the meantime, Early's command on June 30th will make its way in the direction of Gettysburg, as it's supposed to do. There will be a large cavalry battle between Jeb Stuart's Confederate cavalry and Judson Kilpatrick's Union cavalry at Hanover. Early will be 8 miles away from this fight at one point. He'll hear the artillery barking, will listen to it briefly, decide it's nothing of consequence, and instead of sending some of the significant portion of Confederate cavalry had with him to go find out what this noise is that's going on in his rear, he'll instead say, it's not worth the bother, and move on and lose the opportunity to link up with Jeb Stuart's cavalry. So I'm not one for what ifs, but I'll give you one to think about here. Imagine that Early had instead done what he should have done, which was to go and investigate the sound of the artillery, find out that it's Stuart, link up with Stuart so that when his command approaches Gettysburg on the afternoon of July 1st and pitches into the 11th Corps, he's got Jeb Stuart's 4,100 cavalrymen leading his way. Ponder that for just a moment. So John Buford is the commander of the 1st Division of the Cavalry Corps of the Army of the Potomac. It's on the way to Gettysburg that morning. Buford's troops will have skirmished with some of Heath's troops at Fairfield, and after breaking off, Buford will make his way to Emmetsburg, and then from Emmetsburg, just north of the Mason-Dixon line, to the Moritz Tavern, where he will stop and consult with Major General John Fulton Reynolds, the commander of the left wing of the Army of the Potomac. He's going to tell Reynolds that there is a very significant force of Confederate infantry in the Cashtown area before leaving and heading to Gettysburg. After this short face-off with the Confederate infantry, Buford's going to send out scouts who will enable him to report some terribly accurate intelligence back to both Reynolds and Army of the Potomac headquarters about the dispositions of the Confederates. They will, for instance, report the presence of Confederate infantry at Heidlersburg, and he will also report the presence of this Confederate infantry at Cashtown. He will then spot the terrain features that make up the Gettysburg battlefield and decide that given that the threat is coming from the west, he's going to defend it from the west, and will establish a 7-mile long line of pickets intended to serve as an early warning system. Buford is out here with just over 2,900 men, and he's got Heath's 10,000-man division coming from this direction, and he's got Robert Rhodes's direct division, another 9,000 or 10,000, coming from the direction of Carlisle. It's a heavy task. So they'll eventually get driven off of Kerr's Ridge. At the bottom of the hill here, you see there's a low spot. That's Willoughby Run that runs through there. Willoughby Run will cause a delay for the Confederates because they've got to get across it. Gives Buford a chance to redress his lines, but he's becoming extremely concerned.